morning from sunny Honolulu. This is Howard Wiig, featured on Code Green ThinkTech Hawaii. We have a first for ThinkTech Hawaii. This is going to be an all-student show today. I'll give a brief intro and just turn it over to students from Chaminade University. And the title of today's show is Zero Waste Possible? Good morning again, Howard Wiig. Is zero waste possible? I used to be a runner, and in a running magazine, they featured a runner from Africa who came to New York City and won the New York Marathon. He was the toast of the town. He was up on the top of the high rises of Manhattan, wined and dined, fancy hotels, the whole business. And when asked what he wanted to do, he said, "I just want to go home." And they had a photo of him sitting on a log in a jungly atmosphere, just in busted up old shorts, sitting right next to his two brothers, likewise in busted up old shorts. And in the background was a thatch building, which was their very simple home made from local materials. And he was happiest when he was there, all of which leads to the fact that we human beings really don't need all of the stuff that we Americans think we need. We're happiest when we're surrounded by our loved ones and have other values besides stuff. And we have a lot of unhappiness in America, as rich as we are. So we're going to explore today the possibility of reducing our waste. And who knows, maybe the less waste we have, the happier we're going to be. Just for instance, my field is energy efficiency. We all drive around in our cars consuming stuff, gasoline. What if all buses were free? Just a possibility. So then, without further ado, let me turn it over to four students, Kobe, Hina, Sano, and Alex. And Kobe is going to lead the way. So take it away, Kobe.
Thank you, Howard. That was a really interesting story because that person you just mentioned had a mindset which we call zero waste mindset. Now, these people are called zero waste minimalists, and they really think that you don't need that much stuff and you're actually much happier when you have just what you need. So really, zero waste living. What is zero waste living? Today, we're going to talk about the problems of today's world, the consequences that come with it, and the solutions that are associated with zero waste living. I actually want to pass the mic on to everyone else to talk about how or what they think zero waste living means to them.
I guess I'll start off. Zero waste for me, I choose to eat vegetarian, and I've seen not only health benefits, but also it makes me feel good about what I'm eating when I think of the impacts that it has. So for example, eating vegan or vegetarian just one day a week can save on 40 pounds of grain, 1,100 gallons of water, and 30 square feet of land that was originally used to for the production of that meat product. So I can feel good about eating vegetarian, and that's one of the ways I choose to minimize my waste.
One way I minimize waste, I'm not vegetarian, and it's kind of hard for my family to go that way, especially money-wise. So one way that I do it, I just try to buy less single use. When I go to the store, I try to use containers that you can reuse and fill up and take home and then come back to the store and reuse it again. That's a really good way to cut down on trash and just have better values, applying your values to your lifestyle. That's really good. How do you live zero waste, Sano?
Personally, I believe zero waste living is like the conservation of all resources by means of like responsible production or consumption. For example, like a simple one, when you're brushing your teeth, you turn off the lavatory sink. Like, don't waste water. Turn off the light when you don't need it. Like simple stuff like that that actually leads to a huge impact at long term.
Yeah, and so that's really what zero waste is. It's just trying to reduce our consumption, even if it's the smallest habits, such as brushing our teeth or really just buying groceries weekly instead of monthly to reduce food waste. It eventually becomes a really big solution for the entire world. If one person can accomplish that, then more people will be willing to do it. And then eventually we'll have communities that are zero waste living, and we can reduce the entire trash that we produce yearly. So, some of the consequences or problems, I should say, about zero waste living is that it is impossible to have zero waste living. Of course, we're going to produce trash on a day to day basis. However, we can reduce that number from like 10 bags of trash bags a day to like one jar. So, one video that I saw and was very interesting in our class with Dr. Gale was that this girl was living a zero waste minimalist life. And she pretty much made her own soaps, her own toothpaste, her own cleaning products. And when she would shop, she would bring her bags, mason jars, and buy in bulk. All these different small habits overall through like years and years of just practicing really changed and affected her like lifestyle, her emotions, her mood every day. And the amount of trash that she produced within a year was a small mason jar, just like about this tall. So that's pretty crazy because I don't think I can accomplish that myself, but I'm very confident that I can at least try to reduce the amount of trash that I can do. So, what are some problems that you think is really hindering us from trying to get into that zero waste minimalist mindset and life? Hina, do you have any ideas?
Going off of what Kobe said, I really did enjoy that video. Dr. Gale showed us that video. So live your values. That's the words of environmental activist Lauren Singer. That's the girl that Kobe is talking about. She also stated that like other ways you can start to live zero waste is also by composting. And you can also do like little stuff every year. Maybe you can pick 2 things to change out in your lifestyle. Like for plastic toothbrushes, she uses compostable bamboo toothbrushes. For sponges, she uses compostable dish brushes. And all of these little steps, they add up to big steps like in the coming years. And it does make a difference. And you making these little steps, it does inspire other people like, oh, maybe I can do that. It doesn't look that hard. Like maybe it'll be as simple as this. And when you do make changes, then maybe you start with 2. If 2 is too much, then maybe next year you can do 1. Or if it's feel like you can handle it, then the next year you can do 3 different goals. And it's just small changes in the future will make a big difference. There's also this other town, which we also learned from Dr. Gale. It's called Kamikatsu, Japan. They have a population of about 1,500, but in 2003 and prior to that, they really produced a lot of greenhouse emissions, and they would just burn their trash from their homes and dump it in nature. So all around them, it didn't look too nice, and it didn't look greenery. You could just see trash, and they really wanted to change that. So as a town, they created the zero waste declaration. So that means that they recycle in a number of ways. They have 45 different categories, some of which are like aluminum cans, of course, steel cans, fluorescent lights, wooden products. And yeah, so recycling is another big one. Just try to recycle what you have instead of continuing to buy more. And then you can also like repurpose it. At home, I used to use a lot of like detergents and stuff. So one time I was like, this is so much plastic and I'm an environmental student. I feel like a hypocrite. So I'm gonna, I also had a garden. So I just took the cans and then I made them into watering cans. So now I use those. Yeah. Alex, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I liked what both you and Kobe said about just trying. I think that's the best thing we can do is try to educate ourselves and try as best as we can. Because as much as we all want to get to that place of only having a mason jar of waste, it's not realistic for everybody. A lot of the more sustainable items are expensive or not accessible to everybody. So doing what you can, what small things you can do, could make a big difference. And what you said, Hina, about community, finding a community that does that and sharing what you're doing with them will inspire them to be better as well. I think also just doing what you can, the small things that you can do. That's all I got.
Yeah, that brings to mind one of the most influential books that's been published recently. It's called Atomic Habits. And the atomic refers to atom size, where if you just change your behavior a teeny little bit today and then keep it up, then that's so easy that you can select another little habit and change that. And you just add it up. So that's what you, all of you are indicating there, atomic habits.
Okay, so some of the things that we can do on the individual level is really just be more aware of what you're doing. So there is a carbon calculator that you can find online, and there's so many carbon calculators you can find online, or even just water consumption online. And it's really just a survey full of questions, and you can answer them and find out how much carbon you're producing or how much water you're consuming on a day-to-day basis. And it'll show you like how many earths that you'll need to sustain yourself. And really, we only have one earth, right? So we got to protect that earth at all costs. But some people, I myself, I may need like 2 or 3 earths because of the amount of trash that I'm producing. So I may need to change some of my habits in order to really reduce that number into 1 earth. And so that's one solution, is to be more aware of what you're doing. And another thing is the 5 R's. Now, I'm sure more people are aware of the 3 R's, and Hina mentioned some of them. So that's reduce, reuse, recycle. Those are the 3 main R's. But then the other 2 R's are refuse and rot. So refuse is to really just try and not to buy what things that you don't need, such as like produce, plastic bags. Now, I work in a grocery store, so a lot of people tend to use the produce bags for like bananas and apples and whatnot. But there are some people that actually bring reusable bags to the stores so that they don't need that plastic bag, and they can just use their own personal bags to reduce that plastic waste. So that's refuse. And then reduce, reuse, recycle, that's pretty much self-explanatory. However, if those 3 options are unavailable and you really need to buy this one item and you can't really reduce, reuse, or recycle it, then there comes the last R, which is rot. Now, rot is to decompose anything that you can, which is like banana peels or anything organic that you can just use for your gardens or really just use as fertilizer. I started working at Safeway, and I would ask the people at Meat and Seafood or produce, like, hey, where does this go? Where does the waste go? Because I'm really curious to know whether they're just throwing it at the landfills or actually reusing that for something else. And some of the people said that, yes, people actually come pick up the food scraps and then decompose it even more so that they can bring it to other plantations like Dole, for example. So those are some of the solutions that we can practice on our daily routines so that we can reduce our consumptions and try to live a zero waste minimalist life. Does anyone else have any more to add on to that? Sano?
Yeah, just the small things like with what Kobe, or I'm gonna go back to what I said earlier, like turning off your light or water. But also education is really important. And there's a lot of programs out there, online and in person. So for example, there's an immersion program called Junta Mona. So they just like teach about permaculture, herbalism, and just like how to be more renewable in your own daily life, like try to incorporate things. Like, for example, they teach about growing certain plants that can be used for basic medicine or food that's like edible. So definitely education is a big one, and just learning more about the topic is a solution. That is definitely there.
Yeah, I think education, and then Kobe, what you said too about using food scraps for something else, reframing the way we look at waste into something that we throw out into something that we can use for something else. For example, we just learned about wastewater and how usually that just gets dispersed or thrown out to whatever, after obviously it's treated, then it gets, released into the ocean through different routes depending on how they treat it. But maybe reframing how we look at that, the stuff that's filtered out of wastewater can often be used as fertilizer for crops, or for other resources could be taken from the wastewater. So maybe reframing the way we look at things. And then I think keeping up research on different ways to innovate and reuse stuff in that matter.
Nice. Everybody had great things. Besides like being educated and taking small steps yourself, another solution you could do is just being mindful of your waste management and how you discard your waste. Making sure that, like my friend, for example, my friend the other day, he didn't know that you're not supposed to put oil down the drain. And that's just something simple that will help everybody. If everybody knows that, then nobody will do it. And then it'll help us to keep our drains clean and not getting clogged. It'll help us keeping our oceans clean and having our aquatic animals living better. Also, going back to what Alex was saying, like wastewater in the US is really like what you think, wastewater, gross, but in other places that are less developed, they have to use like natural systems for wastewater. So maybe as a community, we can think of doing things like that, and like having natural ways of disposal and natural ways of taking care of our earth. Because before we were here, our earth was really good, and it sustained itself, for many, many years. So I think we can learn something from that. And yeah, anything to add, guys?
Well, while you're thinking about it, I'll give one piece of good news. Our wastewater from our sinks and toilets go to wastewater treatment plants, and what treats the middle of this island is the Honouliuli plant, and they remove the bad stuff, and what remains is called non-potable water. It's clean, but we don't recommend it for drinking. And there's a lot of golf courses out there, so that non-potable water gets diverted to the golf courses, which, as you can imagine, are really, really, really thirsty. And the faucets and everything are clearly marked not for human consumption, But that's one way, one cheery note of what's happening.
So once again, it is impossible to not produce waste, but really, if we can just do our part to maybe reduce it into like a size of a jar. Now imagine that jar 100 times, but really it's reducing the sizes of our landfills, and that's really going to help with our biodiversity and like our land, protecting the land and the oceans as well, because really whatever ends up in the land will eventually end up in the ocean, right? So overall, with our small habits that we practice, we can eventually save the world as a whole.
One way that we Americans are very wasteful is in our transportation way of using energy. We all drive our single cars. They weigh at least 2,000 pounds, and there's about 125 pounds of us moving that around. And then it requires asphalt parking, so forth, so forth, so forth. So one way around that is to make the bus free. There's a simple solution. Any other thoughts on how to reduce our transportation waste?
I think free public transportation is huge. And I also think city planning, where everything becomes more close, so that not only are you using less land, but everything that you need is close by in walking distance, in biking distance, and then the land beyond the city could be nature, left alone in its regular form to function as it's meant to. So I think that's another cool solution of having walkable cities.
I would just promote the use of carpooling and just really walking or riding your bike, because I personally don't have a car, and I walk to school, I walk to work, and if I need to go somewhere, then I would just ask someone for a ride and really just do the smallest things I can. Like one time, the past Saturday, my friend was going to Costco, and she's like, "Hey, you want to go to Costco with me?" And I'm like, "Sure, of course. Yeah, I'll take a ride." So we eventually went to Costco, and that's one less trip for them to like take me to Costco on a different day when they're not going. So really just promoting that, something more realistic that people can do.
Yeah, going off of what Kobe said, um, it's just the little changes that you make on an everyday, daily basis. So, like, if you take into consideration, if you drive your car every day, maybe you're just going to the store, then you can take a walk or ride your bike. And then also, like, on a bigger scale, going back to what Howard and Alex were saying about bus transportation, I do think as a community, everybody needs to come together just to align their values and come to a good medium about it, and then we can implement good policies and actually have bigger scale changes for everybody that we can all participate in and feel better about helping the earth.
Well, I mean, yeah, biking and walking definitely huge, because not only does it reduce waste, it also promotes like an active lifestyle, which is really good. It reduces tailpipe emissions from cars, and you just get to slow down. Don't keep it slow. You don't have to always rush somewhere, which really helps a lot. So yeah.
You gotta live life, look at the flowers.
And I would also point out that walking is the simplest, easiest, cheapest way of getting exercise. We tend to sit a whole lot in our modern world, whereas our ancestors were moving around all the time. They were doing work all the time.
And just to add something, when we first learned about this topic, we learned about like the nomadic lifestyle that our ancestors had, and then how when we transitioned into the agriculture and like the industrialized revolution, when we went into that switch, our mindsets also had a switch that was like, oh, if we have a lot of stuff, then that makes us rich. But I feel like we have to kind of change that mindset now and go back to, we don't need a lot of stuff to live a happy, healthy life, you know? We can just have a little bit of stuff and still live our life good and still achieve goals that we want to achieve. And I feel like everybody needs to understand that and implement that into their values. And then we'll have a lot of good change.
And I would point out that the average new car now, believe it or not, costs around $40,000. What if we chose simpler transportation styles and say smaller, compact, even electric cars? We'd save a heck of a lot of money. And when you save a lot of money, you can do good things with your money. So I believe we've got about 1 minute left. Any parting wisdoms?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest obstacle to really achieve zero waste is the human mindset, what Hina said. So if we change our view of things, then that's when we can really accomplish whatever we want, whatever goal we put for ourselves, whatever dream. So once we finally stop thinking of having the most expensive things or the most things and just really living that minimalist life, then will we achieve not only zero waste, but happiness.
On a final note, I would say that the longest lived people on the face of the earth live in isolated areas, much as our ancestors did. They grow their own food. They're moving constantly, doing physical labor. They're part of a community. They feel part of a community. And they are still working hard well into their 90s, even though their income is just a teeny little fraction of our great big incomes, or for you young folks, your great big incomes to come. Yeah. So any final word here? Nope. Well, thank you, students. You have done absolutely magnificently without your Dr. Gale. And we will be back in 2 weeks on yet another exhilarating topic. And you can tell Dr. Gale, we don't need you. We're doing fine ourselves. You truly are. So thank you, one and all. And for our vast audience, Code Green, ThinkTech Hawaii. See you next time.
Thank you so much for watching ThinkTech Hawaii. If you like what we do, please like us and click the subscribe button on YouTube and the follow button on Vimeo. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, and donate to us at thinktechhawaii.com. Mahalo.